Crunchyroll did it again. They did another massive mess up. Liliana gives the performance of her lifetime to help Priscilla defeat the Sin Archbishop of Lust. At this point, I'm just like, there's no way. There's no way a company can be this incompetent. Obviously they can, but it's just like, how does this happen every single week? So consistently. Like, this episode has been out for hours now, and this is still an issue in their description. I mean, go out of your way right now and check if this is still there for yourself if you want to, but the point of the matter is that the fact that they straight up got the wrong Sin Archbishop name dropped in the description alone just goes to show the lack of consideration or care, not just for ReZero, but for quality control in of itself. I hate to start a video off of ReZero like this, but it really bugs me how this is something that continues to happen for ReZero. If it's not mistranslations, it is bad advertisement. If it's not bad advertisement, it's literally Crunchyroll's managers not knowing the difference between the Sin Archbishop of Pride and Greed, and literally calling Regulus the Sin Archbishop of Pride itself, and then now calling Wrath the Sin Archbishop of Lust. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, how? Do you not watch the show? But even then, even if you don't watch the show, you know for a fact when someone is given a job of translating and having to do this format on the episode, you know they're given cliff notes. You know they're given notes or bullet points for the series most likely. I know that's standard practice. It's just like, how does this happen? And so it really makes me believe that at this point it's intentional. Like, Crunchyroll legitimately is not just giving a middle finger to the people complaining like myself and everybody else, but they're also giving a middle finger to just ReZero in general. And it's so disrespectful, man. How does this happen? I'll leave it at that, though. So, as you can see by the title, before you grill me for the title, okay, I will say that there is a reason why the title is like that. Why a lot of people, before this episode came out, basically were deeming this as potentially one of the worst episodes of ReZero, but also some of the opinions on that have shifted a bit, and I'll get all into that. But first thing, let's talk about Priscilla here. I absolutely love Hair Down Priscilla. I love the way this looks, the whole vibe of it. It just, man, I've been really loving Priscilla so much in this season of ReZero, getting to see more of her personality, how she presents herself, a little bit of her abilities itself. It's just really nice, and I don't know, I love this. And, you know, one thing I want to point out, by the way, a lot of people might not, notice, is that, Priscilla, obviously, every time she takes damage, or in this case, fatal damage, you know, an item of hers breaks. And this is a very important scene. If you look closely, it's very clear that Priscilla, to some degree here, is getting impelled. Like, you could see it. Like, she's getting massively damaged here. And then after this entire sequence, when, you know, Priscilla gets hit, it's like she's completely okay. There's no scratch marks, nothing. But a part of her clothing or jewelry just shatters on her, which, you know, emphasis right here. And it starts to make you wonder what's happening here. What ability is this? How is Priscilla surviving this? Obviously, it's tied to these items, but obviously when there's multiple items doing this, it's not just one magical effect on an item. For instance, like if it was a ring, you might assume or chop it up to maybe there's a magical effect on a ring or something. But clearly with multiple different jewelry pieces breaking, it's implied that it's more or less an ability that Priscilla has than necessarily clothing itself. So it's like, what's really happening here? But regardless, I absolutely love the little sneak peek of Priscilla, what she's capable of, to how strong she is, and kind of laying the foundation that her character isn't very shallow. I mean, I've been talking about this a lot. I've been talking about, like, Priscilla, and how, at first glance, she's a character that kind of comes off as very prideful or arrogant, and the world is supposed to revolve around her, and she doesn't care about anyone else, but that is definitely not the case. I mean, this entire episode really showcases that arrogance of Priscilla, but in a way that showcases she does love everybody around her. To the whole thing with Liliana and how she tasked with Liliana with one of the most important pivotal roles within the episode, to also allowing Liliana to save everyone in the square, to being the one to really kind of cause Raph to go off the deep end, to be able to be taken down in this episode. You know, Priscilla gave a really large role to Liliana and let Liliana, you know, be kind of the main character of this episode, which is very fitting. Actually, it shows a lot about, you know, Priscilla, because once again, Priscilla's persona when she's presented in season 1, and even at the beginning of season 3, she appears to be someone that's all about herself. She's the main character. But to give over the spotlight and the role to someone else shows that she's not that arrogant. So yeah, I love her character. There's a lot to discuss with her. I'll dive more into that in a moment, but let's get into why the title is like it is. So, those that are light novel readers probably already kind of know what I'm going to be talking about, but for those that are anime onlys, you might be wondering to yourself, why? Why did people hate this episode before it even came out? Well, there's two reasons. There was a lot of doom posting about this episode that the overall art quality and animation was going to just do, go down. There's a lot of people complaining about it, basically saying it was going to be bad, and after looking at the episode, I wouldn't say it's as good as the last episode. I'm not going to say that, but it is a very good looking episode. I don't think it is terrible by any means. I don't think it's top tier, but it's not terrible. So the doom posting prior to the episode coming out definitely caused a lot of people to have a negative opinion on the episode before it even aired. And then you tie in the other thing that I'm about to talk about that is negative around it, and it was already people really just saying that this was going to be the worst episode of ReZero history. So let's talk about why this is such a hated episode, or a hated moment within ReZero. So Liliana, she is the main character of this episode. She gets literally a title drop, Liliana, as, the title for this episode. It focuses on her backstory, it focuses on her motivations, how she managed to wind up in the city that she's currently at, who she fights for, what she fights for, and it's a lot. It's a lot of characterization, a lot of character building, character acting, it's overall her journey as a character. And this episode really paints her as a very vital and important player within the world of ReZero. And to give some context here, when this came out within the light novel and web novel of ReZero, a lot of people did not like Liliana. They, sourced and said basically she was the most annoying character they've ever had to see in a series or ever have to read about in a series because of the over-top nature of her character, how she presents herself. It just comes off very annoying. There is a good chunk of the ReZero community that just does not like her character whatsoever. And you throw in the fact that we had an entire chapter or chapters dedicated to her, and now an episode dedicated to her. Those that absolutely hate Liliana are not going to have a good time with this episode. They are going to be furious because just the content of it. Now, personally, I've always been indifferent to Liliana. I have never hated her. I never liked her. She's a character that's just... she's important for the role right now within the story, and that's about it. There is nothing crazy about it. I think she kind of brings out the best in Priscilla, some of the best aspects of Priscilla in this episode, and I think she's more of a vessel to showcase that for setup in the future, and that's more or less how you can take it. But regardless, Liliana gets a massive spotlight, and she is a character to this very point within the story that has had some appearances here and there, but she isn't relatively as interesting as, say, something like going on with Amelia, Regulus, and Reinhardt, Subaru, or even Priscilla, or, Otto, or anything like that. She is not necessarily as interesting of a character. I mean, yes, bards are cool. I love bards. Like, if I play Baldur's Gate, I love to play a bard. I love the support class. I love the music, and, all stuff like that. I do enjoy it. But at the end of the day, Liliana is a character that more or less is just, about singing, and there really isn't a lot more to her. She's a very flat and basic character, no pun intended. She's just a character that's like, I wanted to, sing, I wanted to have songs, and that's basically it, and she wanted to be free, so to speak. And there's nothing wrong with that cliche, there's nothing wrong to that writing or anything like that, but once again, this comes off to the perspective of those that really hate her. They just feel like she's such a uninteresting character and annoying because she takes so much spotlight away from the other said characters within the story. So yeah, that is the comment on the title, why it is like it is, but also why a lot of people do not like this episode or this segment of ReZero because of her said character. Now, with that being said, let us actually talk about her. Let's dive into her and, what this episode actually provides. So first off, I'm just gonna say, I think that the anime does a better job with handling her. Like, I mean, as someone that read this a long time ago in the web novel and all that, I remember being like, just like, reading, I was like, get me back to the Sirius versus Priscilla fight. I wanted to see more of that, and I was more or less like, reading this, but I was just like, okay. And it was just that. It was nothing that I really dived into, analyzed a lot, because it just seemed very bare bones. However, the way it is presented within this episode, it definitely is a lot better formatted, and I feel like it is more digestible in terms of enjoyment factor to the obvious animation, art, and movement and character acting. You could definitely get a lot more from the content, but then you accompany the fact with, like, the singing at the end with her voice and stuff. I think it makes her character that more or less would be, an average 5 out of 10 character into more or less a 6.5 to a 7 out of 10 character. Maybe that's a little bit too high, but overall, her episode focuses on her commitment to her trade, her, what her goal is, to sing and be a bard. And her backstory is basically kind of sad. I mean, she basically runs away from her family, her traveling, group, and she wants to basically sing, and she goes and becomes basically a homeless bum that has really nothing whatsoever. She's starving, obviously. There's a lot of examples to where she needs water or food. She's barely scraping on by, and she basically had to bring herself up with her own bootstraps from a very early age, trying to get where she's at. She is a traveling bard. She's had a very rough life, and she has learned a lot of independence. She's someone that hasn't really necessarily nailed herself down to a certain area, because she feels like she needs to continuously travel to experience life, to experience songs, to be able to be the bard that she wants to be. And she also realizes that she is not necessarily a hero, and I love this entire segment when she's in the water and stuff. She's like, I'm no Reed or the Master Swordsman or anything like that. I'm more or less just someone that's stilling stories or, stilling fables and stuff and just singing them and all that. She realizes that she's more or less a fraud. And at the end of the day, a bard is supposed to sing about heroic tales and stories, but also create, heroic tales as well. And we have clearly seen that. Liliana has tried to make up songs and be herself and design new things, and that's where she mostly shines. When she sings something that isn't, say, a retelling from someone else, that's where her power and her strength really draws from, because she gets to be unique in her own self, creating her own stories. So yeah, I mean, her character is very basic. I mean, there is a little bit more to her, but overall, for the main gist of it, she's basically just a bard that is tasked with snapping everybody out of the soul washing that Sirius Romanacante did in these past few episodes, or this entire season of Season 3. Now, one thing I do want to say is that it showcases the power of music, but also her ability as well, to be able to destroy the actual soul washing of Sirius. I think that is a very big indication that that's why Priscilla had so much, pride in her, or look forward to Liliana being able to sing, because she realized the strength in her voice to be able to even counter something like an authority that could literally cause people to lose control and have their emotions bounce off of each other. It shows Priscilla is a very good judge of character. She knows what people can do before they even realize they are capable of doing it. She's very smart, and that amps up her character quite a bit as well, because once again, Priscilla put this all in motion. She gave, Liliana a stage. She burnt the entire tower with the fire and all that, and gave Liliana the potential to be able to sing to the entire town, and, actually help people. Which, by the way, speaking of the fire, there is something that does need to be stated. The fire in the tower that, is set up, apparently, it cannot burn anyone that Priscilla doesn't want it to burn. So, for instance, if she puts a line of fire, then basically, if she doesn't want those people to burn, they can just walk through it. But it will still be very hot. That's what the episode presents. That it's going to be painful, it's going to be very hot, but it's not going to kill you. It's not going to maim you, it's just going to hurt. And I think that's a big thing here, is that Priscilla's power of control over this fire, it makes you wonder exactly what is all of her capabilities, because it seems so different than just the ability we saw of her being able to not die or not take fatal damage when the jewelry started to break. It starts making you wonder, is she a phoenix or something? Like, it does make sense. Like, when you look at abilities and powers and stuff like that, phoenixes can resurrect, and they start over and stuff. Obviously, there's some differences with whatever Priscilla is doing, but there is some flame attachment and stuff like that, and there is some similarities that are tied to that. Anyways, let's move into the next part, and let's get into Sirius and how she's presented in this episode. So Sirius Romanicanti, the Sin Archbishop of Lust, or, you know, that if we're going by Crunchyroll standards, Lust, actually Wrath, she is quite a character, honestly. I feel like this episode is going to give a lot of people whiplash, mainly anime onlys, because they're going to look at everything and be like, wait a minute, that's it? She's defeated? Like, I know a lot of people are going to be like, wait a minute, she sinks into the water, it's GG, that the end of the fight? Because people are going to be like, wait a minute, this is a Sin Archbishop. Like, everything that we have witnessed up to this very point, you know, Sin Archbishops, they don't go down easy. I mean, like, the little things we've already experienced. I mean, look at, like, Sloth. Sloth was ridiculous to bring down. How hard it was to take him down. So it's like, there's no way a Sin Archbishop like Sirius, the Sin Archbishop of Wrath, would be able to go down that quick. But at the same time, there is a little moment here that Priscilla presents, and she says, you know, you're basically lucky. She mentions her sword, the sunlight fades, the sun is in shadow, and then count yourself lucky you bore. And it's very clear Priscilla is talking to Sirius that you're lucky. Most likely what she's trying to say is it wasn't a fatal blow. So for those that are wondering if it is quote-unquote finished, there is obviously some hints that clearly that might not be the case. So do look forward to that. No spoilers, just obvious dialogue that is presented right here. Now, with that being said, I do want to talk about Sirius's character, what this episode really sets up for her, which has already been established at the early stages of Season 3. But we can see that she is a walking contradiction. Someone that, represents the Sin of Wrath, or the Sin Archbishop of Wrath, but she does not want to dive into that said wrath, and she completely does not understand the concept of love itself. Her very viewpoint on love is that everybody should be facing the exact same direction, everybody should have the exact same mentality, thoughts, and feelings, nobody should be able to have a different form of love, nobody should be able to have a different form of hate, wrath, whatever. It all needs to be a central focused point, and everything needs to be the exact same. And it's clear that Sirius does not understand love itself whatsoever, and anything when it comes to wrath as well. She even admits in this episode that wrath is one of the most ugly emotions ever, and it seems like she's more or less, she does not want to have wrath, but we know she has a lot of wrath because of her encounter with Amelia many episodes ago. So we know she is capable of wrath, she has wrath, and her character seems to really come to life when she does have wrath within her very heart. It's like her true self is really presented, and even Priscilla kind of gets the nail on the head. It's like when someone says something unpleasant that you disagree with, you lash out to silence them because it really upsets you, and we get to see the true side of Sirius because she doesn't want to understand people. She doesn't want to take the time to work out their feelings and how they feel about her. She just wants to instantly understand and get that gratification on what they're currently thinking. Hopefully I'm explaining that right. Basically, she doesn't want to take the time to get to know people. She just is wanting to soul wash them like, oh yes, love, yes, we're feeling the same love and all that. She's like that. She does not want to learn people. And so I think in this case, she's so blinded by her own, I guess, sight of love that she refuses to see anyone else's version of love itself. It makes you wonder what really happened to her to actually be like this. I mean, there's a lot of hints and a lot of applied foreshadowing with her character design. I've talked about this at the beginning of Season 3, but I'll bring this up again. Don't worry, this is not spoilers. It's not even confirmed in the story, just going to be completely blunt. But look at her design for a second. Silver hair, similar build to a certain character. She looks like Fortuna. If you don't know who Fortuna is, it was Amelia's foster mother. Look at her eyes, the burns, everything about it. Apparently she is the quote-unquote wife of Sloth, and we know what happened to Sloth. It just, there is some indication that she might be Fortuna. Now, obviously that doesn't make any sense, because we saw Fortuna die, but anything is theoretically possible. I mean, think about, you know, this arc. I mean, we literally have Wilhelm's wife coming back to the life, okay? Even if it's her corpse, she is back to a certain degree. So what's to say Pandora, as a character that we've already seen being able to manipulate reality itself, could theoretically create some form of mock-up version, a distorted version of Fortuna, which would explain a lot to her character. Now, once again, this is not spoilers. Don't worry, it's not confirmed. This is just me theory crafting, so do not worry. But, yeah, there's clearly a lot more to her character than meets the eye, and this arc, or this episode in general, makes you wonder, when are we going to get it? Now, with all that being said, there is one scene at the end of the episode. It's the after credit scene, and a lot of people are potentially going to miss this, but this after credit scene basically showcases Regulus and Subaru having a confrontation. Subaru's basically giving the deeds of how he came to this conclusion about Regulus's ability. My hometown has a bunch of stars, and the unseen hand was very similar to a star, which is what Sloth had. You have Coriolanus and all that, which is like Lion's Heart. You know, it's very clear that stars have some form of connection to your guys' authorities, and that's how Subaru came to it. He basically gave all the information that I talked about in my last episode review, and obviously Regulus is very upset, and he, really just wants to silence Subaru at this point. And we get a little bit of insight on what's potentially causing his invincibility. It's either distance, or it's something to do with his wife's. One of the case, obviously Subaru's getting to the bottom of it, and the question is, how will he separate him from his wife's? So, that's another good question. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It does help me out a lot, and I love you guys. Chibi out.